The second session of Europe Cities Fit for Future. My name's Eddy Adams. I'm going to be moderating this session this morning. I hope you're all sitting comfortably. I hope you can all see us and hear us clearly. In our old lives, at an event like this, we'd all have had a coffee together already. We'd be talking about the summer we've had. We'd be catching up with familiar faces. Nice to see so many familiar names on the attendees list this morning, but unfortunately this is the new world we're in, so we're all trying to find new ways of doing things. We're all trying to improvise and to keep things going as much as possible. So thanks so much for joining us. We have speakers from across Europe today, and we'll be jumping from screen to screen, so fingers crossed that the technology holds good, but bear with us if we have any little hiccups. I know many of you who are here this morning joined us for the first session last Thursday, where we had a really nice introduction to the Leipzig Charter 2020 concept, ably moderated by Dorothea Pallenberg, and it really gave us a good scene setter for today's session, where we are going to be diving into the detail of what cities are actually doing, and looking at the three dimensions of the Leipzig Charter, which are the just city, the green city, and the productive city. We have three workshops back to back today. After this session, my colleague Marceline Bonneau is moderating the session on the green city, and then Neil Scheffler will be running the session later this afternoon on the just city. Most of us want to be involved in all of these discussions, but it's a big commitment, so it's good to know that they are all being recorded. They will all be available for you to see after the event, so if you can't manage to stay with us for the entire day, then you'll have a chance to catch up later on. And also, don't forget that we can use the hashtags, hashtag City Fit for Future, hashtag EU20DE to let the world know what we're talking about today and to share some of the content from our discussions. So that's the background to today's session. Let me say a little bit more about the format and how we've structured the 2 hours we have together. The first thing to say is that we wanted to have as interactive a session as possible. And I'll say a little bit more about how that will work shortly. We're going to kick off the session by inviting JONAS from the German Association for Housing, Urban and Spatial Development, just to set the scene a little bit and explain what we mean by the productive city as an idea. We're then going to do a tour of Europe, a carbon-free tour of Europe, by dropping in on 4 different cities who can lift the lid on the different aspects of what the productive city concept means. Deliberately, we've chosen cities in different locations, different sizes, with different perspectives. So again, we just hope to be able to walk around the concept and be able to shine a light on some of the different ways in which this notion of the productive city is being operationalized by our colleagues across Europe. We're going to have a short break in the middle of today's session, and then we're going to have a panel session at the end where we'll be wrapping things up and pulling some of our final thoughts together. But before all of that, we would like to hear from you, because this is one of those sessions where not all the knowledge and experience is at the front of the room or on the screen. There is just as much knowledge and experience on the floor that you guys have, and we're really keen to hear from you. And the best way of us doing that today is to use Slido. Many of you will be familiar with Slido as an event tool. We used it in last week's session. The way you access Slido is to go to the website, which is slido.com. You'll see it in the holding screen for the event. And then you have to put in an event code. The event code for today is 11849. Again, that is on the slide, which is in the background. Once you go on there, you'll be able to ask questions, make comments. If you like a question which someone has raised, then you can like that question, and that will push it up the priority list. So again, it's a good way to cluster our ideas and to try and pull some of our key questions together. My colleague Christian Huttenholler will be looking carefully at the questions coming in, and we'll occasionally be pushing the pause button, bringing Slido on screen, and then playing some of those questions back to our our speakers. So that's how we hope to keep in touch with you. You can also, of course, use the YouTube chat bar as we did last week. And maybe just to get us started, let's go to Slido straight away. We were originally going to start with Jonas's presentation, but instead we've asked you a question. And the question we've asked you is, what word or what words do you associate with the phrase productive city? So when I say the phrase productive city, the term, what comes to mind? So just take a minute or two, if you will, just to let us know what does it trigger for you in terms of as a concept. And already we can see some suggestions. We only have 17 at the moment, but let's hear from more of you about what you think the productive city means and what it connects with. The more popular the word, the bigger it gets on the screen, and we can see that at the moment we have circular economy, we have local-based economy, we have creativity. So I'm just going to let that run for a little bit longer while I look at the screen and see what other words we have there. I see we have diversity, we have lifelong learning, we have urban manufacturing, we have efficient, we have fair. A lot of these are keywords which I'm sure are going to crop up in our discussions this morning with our speakers. We have quality of life, we have dynamic, yep. Gender equal city, and we'll talk about, I'm sure today. I mean, one of the key things to say about today's session is, although we have these three dimensions, the just city, the green city, and the productive city, they're not, of course, mutually exclusive, and that means there's lots of blurring between them. So I know that each of our speakers today will touch upon aspects of the environment and the climate issues. I know that several of them also talk about the notion of inequalities and how we make the city just. So, and equally, I'm sure this afternoon and later this morning we'll be hearing thoughts on our key topic today, the productive city. So, inclusive is up there on the screen. Sustainable is also on the screen. I mentioned gender equal cities earlier on, which is a theme which URBACT as a programme has been working very strongly on, which many of you will be aware of. Okay, so I'm going to let that run just now. We'll keep this open so people can keep contributing to it. We'll maybe dip back in later on and have a look and see how it looks later in the morning. But let's shift our attention now to the document itself. As I said earlier, we have these three concepts, these three dimensions, and I'm really happy to invite Jonas Scholze to come in and just to say a bit more about, briefly say a bit more about what this concept means. Jonas has been involved in this entire process, has been instrumental in the Leipzig Charter 2020 development. If you've been at the events, you'll have spoken to and you'll have seen Jonas sharing his ideas and thoughts. Jonas, thanks for joining us this morning from Brussels. Great to see you, and I think you've got a few slides which we'll just pop on the screen. I'm just going to mute my mic so I don't interfere too much with what you're going to say, and the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you much, Eddy, and also a warm welcome from my side. Outside in the world, in front of the screens of the mobiles or televisions, wherever you are. I'm here in Brussels, not sunny weather, but I'm very happy to give you a short idea about the development process of this productive city. So I open immediately my slides that I have prepared. So, all right, so if you joined the last session already, so you get some ideas already how the Leipzig Charter is structured, but for those who are new in this session, just a few words. The building or the structure you see, it looks a little bit like an eclectic building between a Greek temple and the modernist building from Le Corbusier, which might also depict a little bit the 2000 years of history of urban development. Is more or less now the new structure of the new Leipzig Charter. And from the beginning on, we always thought about these how to structure. We always thought about instruments, we thought about topics, we thought about policies that needs to be addressed with the Leipzig Charter. So we ended up on the left side with this kind of instruments, with this principles of good urban planning, these 5 principles of the Leipzig Charter. Then we have the topics we would like to speak about today in the middle. I've put an orange frame around this. And these combined addresses the particular policies for different spatial scales like neighborhood, local authorities, which means the entire city itself, and the functional area in a wider regional space. And the Greek temple, the Greek basis is more or less the framework conditions we will speak about during the last session next week on 18th of September. With many participants also from the European scale. But let's focus into the topic of today. So from the beginning on, when we started to sort out these huge scales of different topics of what do we want to address in the Leipzig Charter, are the main issues of urban development nowadays, we quickly ended up in kind of pillars and silos with different thematic blocks. And from the beginning on, we said, no, this is not this thing we want to address with the Leipzig Charter. We need to overcome this. We need to express this integrated way of combining different topics. So we quickly ended up in this, let's say, old triangle of sustainability to have to express a balanced dimension of this green themes, productive themes, and just themes. So we gathered together many of these single topics, and I've seen on the Slido words you mentioned that many of these topics, what you regard for a productive city, can also be in the green and in the just field. This is that what we understand and what we would like to address with the Leipzig Charter as this integration of economic, social, and ecologic dimension. And of course, everything is interconnected now with the digital frame. So we did not wanted to address from the beginning on the digitalization as a single dimension, because it combines everything and interconnects everything. We have the digitalization of the productive, we have digital issues in the green city and the just city as well. So this is more or less a red thread combining as a bracket or brace all these 3 cities. So I would like immediately slide into the productive city. What we regard as a productive city, maybe some of you have already read the last draft of the Leipzig Charter, which is circulating already since many months, and we explained it also in many events during the last, before Corona, during the last months and 1.5 years. But honestly, we wanted to start with the basics. So what does urban development how is urban development interconnected with the economic development? There's urban development we regard in the first chapter of this part of this Leipzig Charter as the basic for a solid and diversified economy. So we as urban planners need to provide the space for industry, for production. We need the hard facts like logistic infrastructure, calm logistic infrastructure, working infrastructure, and also soft facts like education. We need a skilled labor and workforce in the city. So we need education facilities for children, for higher education, lifelong learning education facilities, and as well as attractive places that we can invite people coming to the city and work in the spaces, and we need public spaces to have an attractive place, the city, to provide a solid base for economic development. So this is more or less the starting point. And then we have additionally, we have during the last years more and more an accelerating process coming by the digitalization, by new forms of production, with pros and cons and new developments we need to react to. So during the Corona pandemic, the issue of closing shops due to the online shopping is a tremendous issue, but Corona was just catalyzed for this. This was a process which was already ongoing, and I think there's also no way of return. So we need to think about how to bring new concepts in this respect. How can we close these gaps, and how can we develop the city with new mixed functions between production, living, housing, and leisure. And this is a big part and a big challenge for the next decades, I would say. And therefore, we need space, and we need new concepts of a mixed neighborhoods to bring back the livability, or to remain the livability in the neighborhoods. And also the building itself. So we need concepts for the combination of housing and production within the single buildings. And the last thing, and then I would like to stop also, is the supply of daily goods. I mean, the concepts or the words I've read are mainly concepts for bigger cities, but we have also think about the productivity also of smaller cities, maybe smaller cities in remote areas with a tremendous issue of the demographic change. So we cannot use the same concepts for the big cities and transfer them easily to the small cities. So they have the issue of the daily supply of goods, of foods, and this is also a big issue that we need to assure when we speak about the productive city. So I would like to stop at this. I can speak for 2 or 3 hours about the production, but I don't want to steal too much time from my speakers beyond me. And just a few words. We were a drafting team, of course, of 5-6 persons. You can see us in the center left. A little bit looks like the Situation Room in the White House. This was the drafting process of the Leipzig Charter, but we have a long dialogue process in Brussels, in Berlin, with a scientific baseline study. So the issues we addressed in the Leipzig Charter were not falling from the sky, or were not created by a small group of people. You all contributed to the process. And at this point, I also want to say a big thank you to all the participants, to their ideas and the long discussions we had. This was a common work, and I very much look forward now for the 30th of November, when the ministers hopefully will sign physically or agree physically in Leipzig this long process. Thank you very much for the moment, and I wish you an enjoying further conference.
Thank you, Jonas. Thanks for getting us started. Thanks for those insights into some of the key themes underneath this chapeau, this kind of headline of the productive city. I was really interested that you referring to COVID as a catalyst, in a sense, something which has accelerated underlying issues we already had in cities, and that maybe applies as much to some of the issues around housing and inequalities as it does to office space, as it does to retail, which you mentioned. So you're right, we could talk about this topic alone for 2 days. Sadly, we are compressing it into 2 hours. So, and good to remind us that this is not the only show in town. We have another event next week as part of our wrap up. There are other events happening throughout the German presidency, including, of course, the Leipzig, the signing of the charter itself towards the end of November. So thanks a lot, Jonas. I know you're staying with us, so we might bring you back in later at some point this morning. So let's jump from Brussels, not so far down the road, to Rotterdam. Rotterdam, if I say the word Rotterdam, most people think of Europe's biggest port, a city which is known for its modernity, for its innovation. We're really happy to have HENDRIK Jan Bosch, who is at the strategic heart, or maybe the strategic brains behind a lot of the city of Rotterdam's work. HENDRIK Jan, thanks so much for joining us. and for accepting our invitation to tell us a little bit about what this productive city concept means in Rotterdam. And nice to have you with us. And again, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddy. As Eddy told you, I'm Hendrik Jan, working for the city of Rotterdam. I will share my contact details on the first slide I will share with you. So in this presentation, I will focus on our perspective to the next economy and how this relates to our actions on labor market supply and demand. I think it's good to say that the key driving forces are not unique for the city of Rotterdam. What we see is that most places have a mix of industries which are growing or emerging, but also have industries which are in decline. Most places have areas where large socioeconomic disadvantages are deemed unacceptable, and we all experience the impact of global developments. What we see is that a positive or a negative outcome depends on how we prepare and how we intervene as a city and as a community. Culture is of utmost importance, and I will shortly share a video with you illustrating the DNA of our city. And after the video, I will illustrate the elements of our next economy approach. We'll show you examples of our practice. And I think in doing so, I will give you an insight into our story, but also show you the various ways in which the Leipzig Charter is of relevance to the city of Rotterdam. How do you pick up with the video?
When it comes to great ideas, it doesn't matter who owns them or where they came from. When it comes to great ideas, what matters is where you take them and where they take you. Great ideas are the product of an open mind, of people that spot the opportunity before they seek approval, of boundless ambition that remains confident when others are in doubt, of dreams and ideals that are fearless and rise to the challenge. Great ideas need people that see the world not as it is, but how it can be. They are the entrepreneurs and the innovators, the teachers, the talents and the investors, the partners and the connectors, the dreamers and the doers. They are the pioneers that make ideas truly great by taking them to the right place, a place to grow, full of possibilities, a city that is alive with energy and home to the business and people alike, a port that attracts and connects and acts as a springboard for those who are ready to conquer the world. What's your idea? What opportunities do you see? Stake your claim, take the leap, and make it great. Rotterdam, make it happen.
It is, of course, a brand movie for the city branding, but it also contains a lot of truth. Rotterdam sees itself as a pioneering, no-nonsense city that acts when opportunities arise and when we see threats. And we strongly believe that if we don't want to fall victim to global developments, we need to create environments where new ideas are welcomed. We do this within the city administration itself. We are, as an example, cooperating in URBACT in the Innovator Transfer Network. And this is a real drive for our 12,000 colleagues who have innovative ideas how they can improve their services to the public. But I think more importantly, we do this by creating conditions where businesses and academia and NGOs, but also citizens can meet and share but also launch their ideas and plans for investments. And as I show you in the later slides, the city is actively creating these environments, and in some cases also provides funding to implement the best ideas, and we also finance the most important investments in, for instance, the energy transition. As a part of our history, we think co-creation and also participation processes are crucial in finding the great ideas, which were also mentioned, of course, in the video I showed you. Rotterdam, the Erasmus University, is the birthplace of the science of transition management. And the basis for this experiment in governance is the participatory process of envisioning possible futures. We do this together. We do not set out our vision for the future as a municipality, but these are real co-creation processes, not just dedicated to the city, but we also combine regional government and businesses that have a regional and international exposure. Together we define transition pathways, and we jointly set up experiments. We have piloting experiments, lighthouse experiments, but also breakthrough experiments to enable us to reach the goals in this transition pathway. And we learn from both the successes, but also from the failures of these experiments. And I think the roadmap Next Economy, which was drawn up, supported by Jeremy Rifkin and his staff, is a clear example of this process. We also, as I mentioned, we also fund these ideas. So we have co-creation processes with citizens, for instance, City Lab, which has been running for quite a few years. And there's a €3 million a year budget to support the best ideas of our citizens. And this fall, we will launch a €100 million investment fund for energy transition. This is a unique intervention because we recently sold our shares in an energy company, and we are reinvesting these the revenues of this sale in driving the energy transition. Yeah, we also have a warning signal when you do not react well enough to the next economy and changes in the economy. So we have the south of Rotterdam, which is an area where social economic problems are, in terms of size and intensity, unprecedented for the Netherlands. And this situation is a result of decades of changes in the economy. They were there before us. So our current economy was their next economy a few decades ago. What we saw is that the port of Rotterdam, at that time the largest port in the world, was mainly based in and around the city center, and it slowly moved towards the coast of the North Sea, bringing with it, or taking with it, all the old blue-collar jobs, where all the inhabitants of the south of Rotterdam found their employment and their joy, and they earned their money to feed their families. And I think this is a good illustration of what happens with a bad outcome as a result of changes of the economy, which were extremely positive for the rest of the city and the rest of the country, but also of most areas of the world. In this context, corrective measures are in order. And instead of a co-creation process and a very participatory process, we fall back on strong leadership. But what is unique in this case is the long-term commitment, which transcends government boundaries, but also goes beyond election cycles. So the National Urgency Programme for Rotterdam South has a 20-year horizon, and it is really a 20-year program, which is currently untouched by the various governments which were elected since the start of the project. What we do is we combine the integral approach for Rotterdam South with the learnings from the roadmap of Next Economy. So together in the shared envisioning process, we identified the growth sectors of the future, and we are actively connecting the parts of the urgency program for Rotterdam South with the learnings and the outcomes of the Roadmap Next economy. Having physical places where ideas and businesses can land is important. An old harbor area, which was left behind, as I mentioned before, has now been renamed Rotterdam Maker District by the city and the port of Rotterdam. And in this area, government, businesses, and education, both higher education, but also vocational education and the universities, have created a multitude of field labs and other innovation spaces for the production, testing, but also learning and training. For instance, we have field labs for the 3D printing of shipping parts. And small SMEs can demonstrate their products. Large-scale buyers from the industry can state their demands and get knowledge of these products. Students will get training, and existing workers will be retrained in the use of these innovative products. A second example is Plant 1. It's a testing site in the middle of the port, and it provides space for testing of industrial innovations. We have a combined approach of incremental improvement of the existing industries, but also of allowing revolutionary approaches to be added on to the existing industrial base. And the investment strategy of our new investment energy transition fund allows for successful innovations which are launched from Plant 1 or which arise from the Rotterdam Maker District to be funded in the near future. We have, together with the ERDF funds of the current budget cycle, we have existing financial instruments which allow for the growth of startups and scale-ups in these areas. But most importantly, these areas are not just for testing, but they also provide training grounds for young people and existing workers. So lastly, there's the question of how we combat the inequalities that exist in our city, but also that may arise if there's a bad outcome of global developments. And in this sense, we have two crucial challenges. The first is how we help young people navigate this complex world of changing jobs and changing economies, and where the jobs are unrecognizable from the jobs their parents are familiar with. And the second one is how we assist existing workers in transitioning to new skills, but also to jobs from their mature and declining industries to the growth industries of the near future. And I want to share as a last slide 2 examples of how we have been able to do this over the last few years. With EU funding from the Urban Innovative Actions Programme, we were able to implement the Bridge project, through which we better align young people's educational choices with future labour market needs. And I think this is important. We always speak about good education and the importance of good education. But if you make bad choices, even a good education is sometimes not enough. And as a follow-up, because this project has now been ended, and we are wrapping up the official side of the EU funding, we started implementing citywide work-learning agreements. We have incorporated the learnings of the Bridge project, but we have added the urgent challenge of assisting existing workers that are employed in these mature and declining industries. Today, we have also announced as a city the concept of schooling vouchers, where we have, as one of the measures in the COVID response, we are going to support 300 existing workers in retraining towards new skills that are required in the future labour market. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jan. A really comprehensive overview, lots of food for thought there. If I can just remind the audience that if you want to ask any questions to our speakers, Slido is the best way to do that. Keep an eye on Slido. I know that Christian is too, and I can't see many questions there yet, but feel free to jump in with questions as we go through. And we have a panel session at the end, so if we have some good questions we want to field in that panel session, we'll pick them up then. Something I want to ask you, Hendrik Jan, was lots of reference to the fast changing world that we are in. And we're kind of living in dog years. Every year now is like 7 years in the past. So it's really, really difficult to anticipate what will be happening in 6 months, let alone 6 years. And can you say a little bit about how Rotterdam is going around trying to anticipate future industry trends? What sort of work are you doing around the foresighting, around trying to get your heads around what might be happening in 5-10 years' time? So it's incredibly difficult at the moment.
Yeah, I think a few examples. Firstly, I noted that we have existing industry changing incrementally, and we have the need for revolutionary new technologies to also find our city from the region, from the rest of the country, but also from other places in the world. And one of the most fruitful instruments to get an insight in the future is the pipeline of our existing financial instruments. So we have fund managers with large networks, and investors and companies reach out to them to test their ideas and innovations and to match them with the investment strategy the City Council has set up. And we see this as an early warning signal in a positive way. So we see lack of inventions and proposed investments in some areas, and we see an overload of investments in the pipeline in other certain areas. For instance, the area of chemical recycling, to use feedstock from municipal waste, to use old tires, and not just to burn them, but to use pyrolysis techniques, to use innovative how do you do that, where you break it down in sorting techniques. For instance, there's a company which can sort the plastic fractions in 100 different fractions, from clear plastic to colored plastics. Those are examples of a future technology and a future industry which we cannot imagine ourselves, but we find these examples from our finance managers.
Slide, and thanks to the participants for coming on board with those. We've got a cluster already, so maybe just pick out one of them, Hendrik Jan. And this is someone's asking, you mentioned the transition approach, and just asking, how can you explain how the academic theory has supported your work on the ground? So I guess you talked about the Jeremy Rifkin work. I know that the Roadmap Next Economy has been a kind of platform for much of the activity in Rotterdam over the last 5 years or so. This link between the theoretical work and I guess and the kind of operational stuff on the ground. How are you kind of making that connection? Because sometimes it's a bit abstract. It's not that easy for people to understand. I mean, what key tips would you give to cities who are trying to communicate effectively the implications of this transition process for businesses and for schools? We've talked about two of those as examples of stakeholders.
I think the difference is that I'm almost 50, so I have 20-year experience in the city of Rotterdam. And when I started, we were very good in goal setting. So we had a political process which was very participatory in a democratic sense, where we set goals for the future, and we had instruments which had a direct or an indirect working, and we were monitoring the programs. That's over. We don't own the future. We can provide a lot of resources where we enable the conversation between the various stakeholders, and this can cover the future of the port, where we have all kind of different visions which we can share and come up with a combined vision. But also, if you have a combined vision, there are different pathways which you can take towards that vision, and you should talk about that. And you should be flexible. When do you recognize which pathway you as a collective choose? And you can see that based on the examples which materialize. So we have a vision for the port and the future of the port. One of the pathways was chemical recycling. Other pathways were, for instance, the use of carbon dioxide in greenhouses and as a feedstock for other products. We see the first one being materialized and the second one very slowly being materialized. So we have shared the visioning of the future. We have the shared setting up and discussing of the pathways, and we have to be very we have to see what happens and be flexible in this case to really invest into the chemical recycling and to stimulate. That's a different instrument. For instance, the usage of carbon dioxide as a feedstock.
Thanks a lot, Hendrik Jan. And your phrase, we don't own the future. If you are in the business of tweeting or you're trying to summarize some of these key concepts in the conversation, that's a great line to bear in mind. And also, thanks for that reminder that this is about political choices. We can't do everything. This is partly about prioritization. It's about trying to second guess where things are going and what are the best choices to make for our city. You've also touched upon this notion of political continuity. I know that some of the other city speakers will talk about this importance of continuity, even in the world, or perhaps especially in a world where things change so quickly. I'm conscious that we're out of time to ask any more questions from slide. Let me say two things about that. We'll have some of these questions to play into our final panel discussion, hopefully. And also we will be following up after today with various bits and pieces. So hopefully we can come back to you with questions which maybe don't get answered in our session this morning. Hendrik Jan, thanks so much for your input. Stay with us and rejoin us again at the panel session at the end of this morning's session. Let's jump across the North Sea. Let's go from the Netherlands to the UK. Let's go to Preston in the northwest of England. Preston is a former textiles town, I think, which again has been, like many cities, reinventing its economy. Delighted to have TAMAR REAY with us from Preston City Authority, who's going to give us again a different angle on this productive city concept. TAMAR, Preston's been doing a huge amount of work around public procurement and the role of procurement in influencing the local economy. So we look forward to hearing from you about that this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to mute my mic and hand over to you, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eddy. I'm just pulling up my slides now. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for the invitation to share a brief overview of our story about innovative public investment and procurement. As Eddy mentioned, we're a city in the UK. We're in the northwest of England, about 50 kilometres from Manchester, with a population of 140,000 people. Our economy is relatively diverse, with our main sectors being public administration, local government, health, education, financial services, logistics and manufacturing. And our business base is made up predominantly of micro and small enterprises, with some medium-sized and some large businesses. We have a mixture of lower and higher level skills, and up until the start of COVID-19, a relatively high employment rate. Today, I want to focus on two particular areas: community wealth building, what it is, why we do it, and our progress so far, and also our procurement journey and making spend matter, our REAY funded network. I have to say it's really tricky to summarise 9 years' work in 15 minutes, but I'm going to do my best for you. So what is community wealth building and why did we take it up? Community wealth building's a different approach to what is considered usual economic development. It's place-based and seeks to redirect wealth into the local economy and place benefits and control into the hands of people and communities. A bottom-up approach, if you like, rather than a top-down. Preston began working on community wealth building in 2011. Lots of the traditional community wealth buildings based on 5 key principles: progressive procurement of goods and services, plural ownership of the economy, fair employment and just labour markets, making financial power work for local people and places, and the socially productive use of land and property. So this slide essentially summarises our progress to date against each of the 5 community wealth building principles. These points, which I don't have time to go into today, but if you're interested to know more, you can visit our community wealth building web pages, the details of which are available at the end of the presentation. However, leaving aside progressive procurement for a moment, I'd like to focus on just one of the 4 remaining principles to highlight some of the work we're doing. We're in the process of a municipal regeneration of Preston. And essentially this means we're looking to regenerate assets which we own and have a future stake in. We have built a smaller, more focused market hall and box market, utilising some beautiful Victorian heritage listed canopies, which previously housed our outdoor markets. On the site of the old market hall next door, an old 70s building no longer fit for purpose and which has now been demolished, we plan to build a cinema and restaurant complex, aiming to draw people back into the city centre at night. The Harris Museum is a 19th century stunning architectural gem, built and donated to the city by a local philanthropist. The Harris houses a museum, arts collection, a library, a cafe and learning facilities. However, it needs to be brought into the 21st century whilst respecting its history. And we've just started this process of reimagining the space to make it accessible for everyone. We also want to broaden our business base to encompass more than just the private sector, and we're working with the University of Central Lancashire, Preston Cooperative Development Network and Co-ops UK to develop 10 worker cooperatives with funding from the Open Society Foundation. The project started last year. Cooperative, a taxi cooperative, and there are a number of others with cooperative pipeline. So returning to the first key principle of community wealth building, which I mentioned, progressive procurement. Whilst community wealth building began in 2011, Preston's procurement journey began in 2013 with the development of a new procurement strategy and the setting up of an internal procurement champions group. What this helped us to understand was that alone we were a small municipality with a limited procurement spend and therefore limited impact on the place of Preston. It was key that we engaged who had much larger procurement budgets than ourselves, so that collectively we could have a greater impact. These institutions include the police, the university, 2 education colleges, Community Gateway and the County Council. Having engaged with them, we then worked with CLES, the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, a think tank based in Manchester, to undertake a collective spend analysis to understand how much we spent, on what, who with, and also where. And this first analysis showed that 5% of the total spend was within the Preston municipal boundary, 39% within the wider Lancashire region, with the remainder being spent elsewhere in the UK and beyond. A second analysis undertaken in 2017, again by CLES, showed that 18% of the anchor institutions' collective spend was within the Preston boundary, 79% within Lancashire, with the remainder being spent elsewhere. So what had changed in the intervening years? Contrary to many claims, this wasn't about protectionism, spending money, as much money as locally as possible. It was more about understanding better our business base, which, as I've said, is primarily made up of micro and small businesses. Understanding who was out there, who wanted to engage with us, public institutions, and who didn't. And if they didn't, why not? And would they if we were able to make things simpler? So things we changed included setting up a procurement practitioners group, and this included private sector business representative organisations to share experiences and know-how. We also looked to simplify procurement paperwork as much as we could, and to break contracts down into smaller lots, which would make it more attractive to smaller businesses to tender for. We engaged with the market, for example, through supplier days, and improving our procurement web pages so things were easier to find. We've included social and environmental criteria where we can, and we've built a business database. Most of these things are small changes in and of themselves, but together they have potentially big impacts. We've also shifted from a Preston-specific approach to a wider Lancashire approach to reflect the nature and geography of some of our anchor institutions, in particular the County Council, the University and the police. Alongside this work, we have successfully applied to the EU-funded URBACT programme and had the privilege of leading 2 networks. The first, Procure, was an action planning network which sought to exchange experience and learn from 10 other European cities about strategic procurement, from pre-commissioning to monitoring and evaluating. And the second is Making Spend Matter, which came out of Preston being awarded the URBACT Good Practice label for our work on spend analysis and procurement. Making Spend Matter began in April 2018 and will finish early June next year. The objective of the network is to transfer Preston's identified good practice of using the analysis of procurement spend as an evidence base to improve procurement processes and practices to 6 cities across Europe, who you can see listed here on the slide. There are 2 elements to the network's activities. The first is core transfer of basic spend analysis, where we have taught the 6 cities how to undertake spend analysis themselves, with the objective of them adapting it to their own contexts and considering how they will reuse it in the future. Each of our partners has successfully carried out this analysis of their procurement spend and shared it with other partners. We are in the process of evaluating the tool we used and the accompanying guide. Both of these will be available publicly for anyone to use shortly. The second element is an optional transfer, which gives partners the opportunity to explore further aspects of the good practice in more detail. For example, engaging with SMEs, how to use social and environmental criteria, how to undertake an advanced spend analysis, and how to develop a strategic procurement plan and social value procurement framework. What we have done and the things we have learned over the course of the last 2 years will be summarised in a report which will be available following our network final conference in March next year. In the meantime, some of the lessons that we have learned along the way are listed here. The familiar refrain we came across from partners at the start of the network was, procurement is too complex, we can't do this. But what the last 2 years has shown is, yes, we can, provided you have organisational and political buy-in. You're in it for the long haul. There will be some easy wins, but other things take longer to do. Relationship building is key, both internally and externally. It's possible to change the way you do things, but it must always be relevant, appropriate, and proportional. This is not about breaking procurement rules. It's about using them to do procurement differently. Procurement isn't dull, and it isn't boring. You can bring real tangible change, and that's the best feeling, to know that what you have done has had an impact on your city and your communities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tamar, for that overview of what's been happening in Preston, the so-called Preston model, which is now becoming a model in other parts of Europe, thanks to the transfer work that you're involved in at the moment. I'm very glad you addressed the issue of protectionism, because sometimes people look at this approach as being a kind of introspective closing off, a kind of almost anti-competitive way of working, and I'm glad you picked that up and talked about the connection with the kind of wider policies around equalities, around just having a better understanding of where the money goes, because I guess that's always the starting point. I'm just having a look. Let's have a little look at ask Christian just to remind us what's happening on Slido. Let's see. No, we haven't got anything specific yet for you, but we will have, I'm sure, in the coming minutes. So we'll keep an eye on that. One question I had, and it connected to something which Hendrik Jan said. Hendrik Jan talked about this, the importance of having all the key players aligned, as it were. And you mentioned anchor institutions. Can you say a little bit more about what we understand by anchor institutions locally, what they are, and how you work to get them on board? Because quite often these big organizations have their own strategic objectives, and it might not always be easy to persuade them that you want them to start lifting up the lids of their procurement operations. So just tell us a little bit about how you've gone about doing that.
Yes, no problem. So anchor institutions are organisations that are rooted in the place and the community. So, for example, the university has a huge stake in the community and is, in fact, undertaking a €200 million master plan at the moment to improve its facilities and its connections with the city, really. So, in addition to that, we also have the police, as I mentioned, the two educational establishments. So they're all institutions that spend a lot of money in the city. They employ a lot of people, and they have a lot of assets. And it's really important because, as I mentioned in my presentation, we are a small municipality with a small procurement budget. So it was really important that in order to create the greatest impact possible for the city, that we worked with other people and other institutions. And so that was what we did.
Thanks a lot. I'm going to ask Christian, I think you had a question actually. Do you want to come in with your question for TAMAR?
Yeah, thank you, Eddy. Just because we did a little joke between us, but I will put it in another way now. I think
I can't hear you so well, Christian.
Sorry.
There's a bit of interference with the microphone.
I just wanted to, it's more a comment because I find it really very interesting, your concept, and it's especially also politically very important that even if, unfortunately you are not in the EU anymore, it's very important to keep you in this exchange of experience and also to, let's say, pronounce it clearly towards the EU institutions that we need also more flexibility in procurement rules to make an impact, let's say, on the local economy also to use this issue. And that is, so I'm very glad that you were in this URBACT network also, which has an important impact. But because if I see, for example, in Germany, the cities not only themselves with their own budget have a lot of impact on local economy, but also the housing companies that are owned by the cities. Let's say that there's a huge local economy, but which is under the umbrella of the procurement rule. And so this is a very, very important issue also to be addressed, example, in this procurement partnership of the EU urban agenda. So thank you very much for your intervention. So it's much more of a comment than of a question.
Thanks, Christian. And I think Tamar is right to say that you've been involved in the Urban Agenda Partnership and Procurement, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
Great.
Which has been a really interesting piece of work. And we've been able also to share our work around spend analysis and evaluating wider impact with the partnership. It's been an excellent 3 years of work.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tamar. And I guess underneath a lot of these conversations are how we get better at transferring things that work in some parts of Europe to other parts of Europe. And as we know, this is not a copy and paste activity because as landscapes look different, cultures are different, the governmental setup is different. So the transfer networks, the REAY transfer networks, which Tamar mentioned, are doing, I think, quite pioneering work in terms of understanding how we can get much better at avoiding reinventing the wheel. where we all end up looking at the same problem and finding our own local solution. So thanks for your input, Tamar. Again, I'll just remind everyone that this session is being recorded. We'll be sharing the materials afterwards as a chance to follow up. And if you want to hear more about what's happening in Preston or in Rotterdam, then I'm sure our speakers will be happy to hear from you. I can see it is 11 o'clock. We're going to take a short break. So welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a chance to stretch your legs a little bit and to maybe get a bit of fresh air. So we are back on track on our session looking at basically, we called this translated into action. So it's about under these principles, what does this actually mean in practice for cities? We've already heard from Rotterdam and we've heard from Preston. We're now going to go to the Mediterranean coast. We're now going to go to the south of France, to a city which is maybe less well known than Rotterdam and Preston, Mouans-Sartoux, but is a city which is punching above its weight, if I can use a boxing analogy. And we're very happy to have Nathan BEGOC here with us this morning to tell us a bit about the work that has been going on in Mouans-Sartoux around food policy and approaches to food which really cut across all three of our themes, green, just and productive. So Nathan, thanks so much for joining us. I think you're going to show a video first and then show some slides. But anyway, the floor is yours and it's really nice to see you and to have you with us this morning. Thank you.
Hi, hello, nice to see you. First of all, I would like to thank you, Eddy, and also the Deutscher Verband für Wohnungswesen for inviting us to this presentation. First of all, can you see the presentation on the screen? Is it functioning well? Okay, so I will just start. To introduce Mouans-Sartoux, so we're going to talk about food issues and everything that's related with. What we have, our topic is sustainable and healthy school canteens, the first step towards the territorial food project. So how we can go to 100% organic food without extra costs.
So I'm going to interact. I think if people can see the same screen as me, we've got your presentation on the top left, and then we've got a black box in the middle. So I'm not sure if you can adjust that so that when you're my age, your eyes aren't so good. It's hard squinting into the corner of a screen. So I don't know whether you can maybe just have a look at your slides.
I'm very sorry. It actually changed since we have done the tests during the week. I don't know what happened. I will just share. Okay, I will try this way.
Okay, these are the joys of technology.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks so much. That's much better.
Okay, sorry for the technical issues. Well, so as I was saying, as Eddy was saying, sorry, I'm going to show you a video, but first maybe a short overview about Mouans-Sartoux. So we actually are a 10,000 inhabitants city located in the southeastern France. So we are right in between the city of Grasse, which is known for its perfume, and the city of Cannes, which is known for the film festival. For those who don't know both cities, it's about 30 kilometers from Nice. So basically, that's a place where we have a really high estate constraints, lots of tourism, lots of activities going on around the city. About our practice and our good practice, we are working a lot on food issues and sustainable food issues in particular. We actually switched to 100% canteens in 2012 without extra costs. So you're gonna see how it was done in the video. Here are just a few facts on our collective school catering. So 3 different schools with 1 kitchen in each school, about 1,000 pupils, which nearly all of them eat at the canteens every day, or just a few days a week. And actually, we decided to manage the catering inside of the municipality. And as you see, the price paid by the families is between 2 and 6.60 euros, depending on the revenues of the families. So we will now go to the video. So Hauke, if you can just switch it on, I will stop sharing my screen so that You can share it as the video.
Avec ses cantines 100% bio, sa régie municipale agricole et ses actions d'éducation, la ville de Mouans-Sartoux a mis en place depuis de nombreuses années déjà une politique alimentaire durable qui vise à préserver la santé de ses citoyens et de son environnement. La ville est aujourd'hui reconnue comme un modèle à l'échelle nationale et internationale et ne compte pas s'arrêter en si bon chemin. Depuis 2012, les cantines de la ville sont passées au 100% bio avec une majorité de produits issus de l'agriculture locale, de la région PACA et du Piémont italien. Ce passage au 100% bio s'est fait sans surcoût, et ce grâce à la diminution drastique du gaspillage qui est passé de 150 à 30 grammes par assiette, soit une diminution de 80%. Au cœur de cette transformation, les équipes de cuisine qui œuvrent quotidiennement pour fournir des repas aux 3 écoles primaires de la ville.
Dans les cuisines de Mouans-Sartoux, nous utilisons que des produits bruts. Les légumes arrivent directement de notre régie agricole et sont pesés. Nous nous chargeons ensuite de les décontaminer. Le travail prend du temps, c'est difficile, mais c'est beaucoup plus intéressant pour nous d'utiliser des produits frais, non préparés. Et nous savons ce que nos enfants mangent. Alors aujourd'hui, nous avons au menu une salade composée avec des tomates, des concombres, du basilic, de la cébette, de l'oignon rouge. En plat chaud, nous avons un gratin de pâtes aux légumes avec omelette. Et nous avons du yaourt avec confiture de fraises et abricots. Alors le lundi, nous avons l'atelier d'étape pour les enfants. Donc j'ai un groupe de 13 enfants et nous faisons des ateliers, des salades de fruits, de la tapenade, de l'anchoyade, des smoothies. Ça plaît beaucoup aux enfants de pouvoir travailler les recettes, les légumes, les fruits.
Située dans une région de faible production agricole, la ville a dû innover afin de pouvoir fournir des produits bio et locaux aux cantines. C'est pour cela qu'elle a créé la première régie agricole municipale de France afin de produire elle-même ses légumes. Depuis 2011, 3 agriculteurs cultivent 3,5 hectares de terre et fournissent 25 tonnes de légumes par an aux cantines, ce qui représente 85% de leur approvisionnement. Rien de tout cela n'aurait été possible sans l'implication des élus qui soutiennent et mettent en place de nombreux projets.
Depuis plusieurs années, la ville de Mouans-Sartoux développe un projet alimentaire de territoire pour construire notre souveraineté alimentaire et offrir à nos habitants une alimentation respectueuse de la santé et de l'environnement. Au début, nous sommes bien sûr appuyés sur le levier de la restauration collective, qui est la compétence de base des communes, pour offrir aux enfants une alimentation saine, mais aussi pour sensibiliser les parents à ces enjeux. Et ensuite, à travers la Maison d'éducation à l'alimentation durable, nous avons développé de nombreuses animations, événements pour sensibiliser et éduquer l'ensemble des habitants de la commune à acheter plus local, plus bio, plus de saison. Et pour permettre la réussite de ce projet, bien sûr, il a fallu travailler sur l'offre alimentaire et donc développer et préserver les surfaces agricoles et aider les agriculteurs bio à s'installer sur le territoire pour permettre un approvisionnement direct de la population auprès des agriculteurs locaux.
Persuadée que l'éducation est la clé d'un changement d'habitude et de comportement, l'équipe municipale a mis en place de nombreuses actions destinées aux enfants scolarisés dans les écoles de la ville. Elle s'est pour cela appuyée sur les équipes d'animation qui éduquent les enfants tous les jours.
Avec toute l'équipe d'animation, nous mettons en place des activités pour les enfants. Nous les éduquons à adopter les bons réflexes pour une alimentation durable et un environnement sain. Nous les amenons sur cette parcelle pédagogique qui est spécialement destinée aux enfants et juste à côté de celle qui produit les légumes pour les cantines. Ici, ils peuvent ainsi vivre les saisons, les toucher, les sentir et pratiquer des notions de jardinage écologique, bien évidemment, sans pesticides. Il y a également des classes d'immersion qui viennent toute une semaine et pratiquent leurs cours en parallèle d'activités autour de l'alimentation durable et de l'environnement. Et sur les temps d'activité périscolaire également, ils viennent régulièrement.
Si les actions d'éducation visent principalement les enfants, la ville cherche aussi à plus largement éduquer ses citoyens. C'est pour cela qu'elle a mis en place le défi Famille et Alimentation Positive, qui chaque année permet à une vingtaine de familles d'apprendre à manger plus de produits bio, plus de produits locaux, et ce sans augmenter leur budget. Différents ateliers tels que des ateliers cuisine ou nutrition, ainsi que des visites de producteurs ou de commerçants locaux sont organisés. Les résultats sont très positifs puisque cette année, les familles ont déclaré avoir consommé 26% de produits bio en plus, tout en réduisant de 26 centimes le prix de revient de leur repas. La ville cherche aussi à régulièrement évaluer ses actions et a mis pour cela en place un questionnaire qui est posé tous les 3 ans aux familles. Cette année, les résultats ont été aussi très positifs puisque les familles ont déclaré pour 97% d'entre elles être satisfaites des actions menées par la ville en termes de restauration collective scolaire et 87% d'entre elles ont même déclaré avoir changé leurs habitudes alimentaires grâce aux actions menées par la ville.
Pour piloter le projet alimentaire de la ville, la mairie a décidé en octobre 2016 de créer un service dédié à l'alimentation durable. Il s'agit de la Maison d'éducation à l'alimentation durable, ou MEAD. C'est une équipe de 6 personnes qui met en œuvre et coordonne les différentes actions du projet alimentaire territorial. Donc ça passe par l'installation d'agriculteurs sur la commune, l'essaimage de la pratique de Mouans-Sartoux ou encore la sensibilisation des publics scolaires ou des citoyens. Nous cherchons également à toucher des publics qui sont de prime abord plus éloignés ou moins concernés par l'alimentation durable, comme les personnes âgées ou les entreprises au travers de groupes de travail avec le secteur privé. Et enfin, nous essayons de travailler des thématiques plus nouvelles autour de l'alimentation durable, comme l'implication citoyenne ou l'évaluation d'impact sur une santé globale des actions autour de l'alimentation.
Afin de faire toujours avancer son projet alimentaire, la ville de Mouans-Sartoux a noué de nombreux partenariats extérieurs. C'est notamment le cas avec l'Université de Côte d'Azur, avec qui elle a mis en place un diplôme universitaire de chef de projet en restauration collective durable, qui permet chaque année à une douzaine d'étudiants de se former aux techniques de Mouans-Sartoux pour ensuite les importer dans leur propre collectivité. La ville a aussi été en 2018 désignée chef de file du projet européen Biocantines qui, financé par l'Union européenne, permet à 6 autres villes en Europe de transférer la pratique de Mouans-Sartoux et de l'adapter à leur propre situation. Grâce à un engagement combiné de ses élus, de ses techniciens et de ses citoyens, la ville de Mouans-Sartoux s'est imposée comme une ville pionnière de l'alimentation durable et cherche à partager ses idées à différentes collectivités en France et en Europe afin de faire avancer la transition écologique.
So thanks a lot for watching the video. I can switch back to the presentation. So as you have seen in this presentation, Mouans-Sartoux good practice is based on the school canteens, but we also have a more global overview on the whole food system in the municipality, and this is something which is really important for us. And this is why we are working on the dissemination of the project. So we are welcoming a lot of municipalities from France and beyond. And yeah, I would like in particular to talk with you about the BioCantines network. So such as Making Spend Matter, it is a URBACT funded network. We have actually 7 cities across Europe working together. So we transferred Mouans-Sartoux's good practice, but we also learn from each other. So it means that there is an exchange on both sides, which is very important for us. So we work on all these different topics, so food education, food micro-good practices. So this is the part made in the kitchen, but also on the food sovereignty, how to also install some farmers on the territory. So it is actually a lot of work that is being done by all the partners. And also, as Tamar was saying, it is really interesting to work in such a kind of network because we really need to work and to adapt the practice to all cities. For example, not all countries have canteens, or not all countries have the same definition of canteens, so we need to adapt the good practice to the local situation, and this is something really, really important. And this is something that can be done very well because we have been actions going on, for example, in Portugal, lots of education actions. They also increased the share of organic products in Italy or in Belgium. And they even got, so you can see here in the middle, the picture with the apple. This is the first apple of the orchards in Trojan in Bulgaria. So because this partner city decided to create a municipal farm as in Mouans-Sartoux to feed the canteens. So actually dissemination is going very well, and we are always keen on welcoming cities, not only from the networks, but also from all Europe and even from the world. So thanks a lot for your attention. I hope this was clear. You can here find the contact data that also going to be shared on the YouTube video. So if you have any question, feel free to ask. And yeah, if you want to contact us for more information, don't hesitate to do so. So yeah, thank you very much. And I'm waiting for your questions now.
Thank you very much, Nathan. That's great. I hope you managed to get, I hope those of you in the audience managed to get a snack during the breaks. I don't know about you, looking at all the production and everything else in Mouans-Sartoux made me realize that hopefully lunchtime is coming soon. I mean, this is a really interesting story from a number of angles. I mean, quite often we hear Mouans-Sartoux compared to Asterix, this tiny figure fighting against the rest of the world, against these huge agribusiness interests. And you know, and behind this story, there are lots of other dimensions. The planning conversation, for example, how you resist in a place like the Côte d'Azur, where there is huge pressure in terms of urban development, i.e. making buildings, how you preserve the land, how you create a municipal farm. It's a really very inspiring story, and also links into some of the themes which Marceline's next session on the Green City will talk about. For example, you talked about reducing waste. There are aspects of circularity, so lots of things in the mix which we would love to discuss further if we had more time. I see on Slido we have one question, Nathan, for you, which is how has the impact of COVID impacted on the distribution of food to kids in schools, for example? So all this about local supply chains, and clearly the world has been turned upside down. I mean, just share with us, if you will, how have you handled that? What's been happening in relation to that in these past few months?
Well, actually, this was, of course, as in any other place, a new situation that we had to handle. I have to say that on some aspects it was positive for us, because on the global comprehension of the people, more and more people decided to go to local products and to short chain supplies. So there was a really strong dynamic that was already started before the COVID crisis, but it really increased this dynamic, especially during the containment. So we stayed 8 weeks in containment in France. Even if afterwards it's lowered a little, but it still was higher than the levels previously to the crisis. So this is something that also showed that we really need to keep working on these issues, especially about food sovereignty, because we have seen that the market can sometimes face some big problems. And what if our food is coming from very far away? Then we cannot have food guaranteed. So this is something that really came into the mind of lots of people. So this is something that really helped us to keep sharing our good practice.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, thanks, Nathan. And I guess in terms of the big ideas which are of the moment, the notion of the 15-minute city and how we get these short supply chains, how we reduce our carbon footprint. I mean, you guys have been, I guess, ahead of the curve, way ahead of the curve for a long time on this. So, you know, timing is everything, and maybe your moment has come. So let's hope so. And I know that your example is inspiring the other cities you're working with in the URBACT transfer network that you mentioned. So thanks so much, Nathan. Stay with us. We'll bring you back in for our panel session at the end of this morning's workshop. Let's stay in the sunny south of Europe. Let's hop up to Portugal. Let's go to Aveiro, where we have ANDRÉ Costa joining us. ANDRÉ, great to see you. You're going to tell us a bit about some work you're doing through Urban Innovative Actions, but also picking up on some of the themes we've already talked about, the mismatch between skills, the new economy. So I won't say any more. I'll leave the floor to you to tell us the Aveiro story. Thanks a lot, ANDRÉ. I'll just mute my microphone and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eddy. First of all, this is the definition of a tough act to follow. Very interesting 3 presentations from our colleagues panelists in this conference. First of all, I'd like to, on behalf of the City of Aveiro, thank you for the invitation to participate in this conference and to share with you what we've been doing under the Aveiro Tech City initiative. Let me share with you first the slide. Please just confirm if everything is good. Yeah. Okay, so let me briefly introduce you to the city of Aveiro. Aveiro strikes a perfect balance between people and nature, between tradition and modernity, making it one of the most important urban centers in Portugal, and giving it a status of one of the best cities to live, to visit, or to do business in. We have currently a population of around 80,000 inhabitants, and over the last 18 years, we have registered a significant population increase of around 15%, and as we have exceeded cities like Coimbra, Lisbon, or Porto, and the country as a whole with only 7% increase of population. We believe that one of the reasons is the presence of a strong business sector and industry, which in turn creates opportunities, employment, and increased purchasing power. Aveiro is also known as a territory of innovation, where digital technologies are a present reality, but also we have great history and legacy on that. Most recently, the mayor has presented Aveiro as a candidate city to become European Capital of Culture in 2027. And we have been investing in the execution of a strategic cultural plan with great vision and ambition that is focused on 4 areas: culture, environment, tech, and soul. And this Aveiro Tech City initiative is providing a lot of content and a lot of work related with one of these 4 areas of this strategic cultural plan. Globally, as we all know, we have been witnessing the development of a new digital era, where the future of lifestyle and labor market will be profoundly changed. And taking this into consideration, the city felt the need to take action and launch an initiative to support the digital transformation of our territory. And this initiative was named the Aveiro Tech City. Let me also say that as a backbone of the Aveiro Tech City initiative, there's a project that is approved and being implemented under Urban Innovative Actions, this STEAM City. This is the backbone of this strategy, and it allowed us to put in place many of the actions that we have developed in this co-creation process with our partners. This initiative is led by the city of Aveiro, but with the direct involvement of other stakeholders that include, among others, the University of Aveiro, the Institute of Telecommunications, or Altis Labs. Altis is the R&D institution from the Altis Group, a French company. They are the 17th largest telco company in the world. And we have in Aveiro 500 to 600 engineers that are leading the R&D strategy of this group. So it was taking advantages of the strengths that we have in our local ecosystem, understanding and knowing what would be our strategic stakeholders, that we designed in a co-creation process an integrated strategy to support the development of our local economy based on technological innovation and knowledge. This Tech City initiative is divided into 4 axes of intervention: education, training, technology services and apps, and challenges. There are over 20 different activities that we are at the moment implementing, and so that you can have a better understanding of the impact of the project, I've decided to focus this presentation on 4 activities, one from each of the axes of intervention. On education, I will talk briefly about the tech labs. On training, I will present you the Tech City bootcamps. On tech services and apps, I will present you the Aveiro Tech City Living Lab. And on challenges, I will briefly present you the Aveiro 5G challenges. So let's start with the education. We intend to develop a society based on knowledge, and to do so, we need to prepare our young generations, our teachers, and our educators with multidisciplinary skills to succeed in this new digital era. We have different activities, as I mentioned, that we are now piloting in Aveiro, and the Tech Labs is one of those. We are working in close cooperation with researchers from the University of Aveiro. It wouldn't be possible to implement this project if we didn't have the university and if we didn't have these researchers that have been working for over 16 years in the field of technological and scientific culture. So again, it's about understanding who are the stakeholders and what is it that we can benefit from their knowledge and their projects. And so we have defined a program for all levels of education, from primary to secondary school, and also for all schools. We want to implement the tech labs in every school, not only schools that are located at city center, but also those that are located in the perimeter areas of the city. The main objectives are to promote the knowledge in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, also to consolidate critical analysis, self-learning, collaborative work, and problem-solving resilience in our students, and to offer, and this is very important, all the relevant skills and the necessary knowledge to our teachers. They will be the change agents in schools. They will be the ones that will be implementing this program. So it's crucial that we have them on board since the beginning, and it's crucial that we provide them all the necessary tools to have a successful outcome of this project. Despite this COVID-19 situation, we were able to achieve positive results in this first year of implementation. We installed the tech labs in 31 schools on primary level, first cycle of education, and also 4 tech labs in all secondary schools. We were able to engage 100 teachers in the training courses, but unfortunately, we were not able to provide the insight support to our teachers and students. This process, we started the design of this STEAM education program with the directors from the schools. And since the very beginning, we were told that not only the equipment and the training was needed, but also the insight support to the teachers in the first year of implementation of the project. This is what we haven't succeeded so far, but it was due to this COVID-19 situation. But we will start doing it already this October. These are some images of the activities that we are implementing. It's important to stress that these different activities and games, teachers will be able to implement, taking into account the educational curriculum in different years. So the students are not only learning their subjects on maths, on nature, on history, but also consolidating critical thinking, self-learning, and collaborative work. These images were taken in February when we started the implementation of the tech labs in schools. At this moment, we still have the researchers and the team from the university supporting our teachers, but as I mentioned before, we were not able to continue with this particular activity. Nevertheless, we were able to see that the kids were learning while having fun, and that is very, very positive. They were more motivated to learn, and they really enjoyed the first classes that they had using these tech labs. And also what we realized that the teachers were also enjoying the implementation of these activities and the new teaching methods that were being put in practice. Let's now move on to the training X. Within this X, one of the most important challenges that we presented also to the University of Aveiro was to develop a responsive labor observatory that would be able to understand the needs of our local economy and design the necessary training activities to support our industry. Of course, addressing this challenge will take time. We already have different reports and we have already conducted different interviews and questionnaires to our local industry. But being aware of the immediate needs that we already knew from our ICT companies, the city of Aveiro decided to launch in 2020 the Aveiro Tech City Bootcamps. As presented recently in an article by the UIA program, this activity can be seen as coding skills for non-geeks only, a smart strategy to train human resources and retain talents in the Aveiro region. Well, this is an intensive training program dedicated to unemployed, students, or employed professionals that are looking for new career opportunities. It aims at promoting coding competences among citizens that wish to work in our ICT ecosystem as full-stack developers. This bootcamp is certified by the Employment and Labor Relations General Direction, and it includes 14 weeks of training in classroom context and 14 weeks of training in work environment. Let me tell you that the first edition and also the second edition that we are now already going through, we add not only classroom context, but also online context because of the COVID-19 situation, but we were able to proceed with the activities. They never stopped, and we were able to conclude the training in the classroom and on online. And from the first edition, also our trainees went to the ICT companies to start training in the work environment context. Apart from companies in the tech sector, there is an increasing number of businesses that are relying on computer coding. Software engineers could just as easily find themselves working in companies like Apple as they could be in a hospital or in a manufacturing company. Programming jobs overall are growing 12% faster than the market average. And this is the main reason why I've decided, even before we had the results from the Labor Observatory that university is now implementing, that we have decided to launch these bootcamps. We will organize 3 bootcamps throughout the year of 2020, and hopefully we will get 60 full stack developers ready to integrate our local ecosystem. Let me say that in the first 2 editions that we have organized, one has been concluded, the second one is now starting. We have around 60% of applicants that are coming from outside Aveiro. So we're actually able to attract talent to Aveiro. Now let's see if we're going to achieve this goal of 90% of employability rate so that we are able to secure and retain those talents here in the city of Aveiro. And this is one example of the activities that we will be implementing in the area, in the axis of training. Let me now move on to the third axis of technology services and apps. Well, we had this ambition that we will be presenting now in this October during the Aveiro Tech Week that we will be organizing, of presenting the Aveiro Tech City Living Lab. This Living Lab is an infrastructure that aims to be a space for testing innovative solutions on IoT and smart cities in a real context. But what is it that we have in this Living Lab? Well, the Living Lab is composed of an advanced communications infrastructure and an innovative urban platform that collects data. We have 16 kilometers that were just installed of the latest generation fiber technology. We have 44 reconfigurable radio units with a different set of sensors for data collection. We have a 5G experimental network that includes 4 macro cells and 1 5G core device. And we have an urban digital platform that collects all data from different sources. But to whom is this Aveiro Tech City Living Lab? Well, it will be available for researchers, digital industries, startups, scale-ups, R&D centers, and entrepreneurs that, as I mentioned, are interested in developing, testing, or demonstrating new IoT and smart city products and services. And these are some of the domains about where solutions can be tested or developed. We're talking about autonomous vehicles, last mile delivery services, interactive new apps, waste collection and management, traffic management, smart urban furniture, among others. And here are some examples of use cases that we have already started to test. We have the themes of mobility, environment, and energy. Just to go briefly, for instance, in environment, we have just concluded the installation of 9 environmental stations focused on the assessment of the air quality, noise, and temperature. And we believe that this will provide us valuable information in urban planning. On energy, we have just launched the public tender for the installation of electrical charging stations in the urban water canals. We want to promote the shift from fossil engines to electrical ones to the 27 traditional boats that are called muliceiros. We have 27 licensed boats in our water canals that provide touristic tours in our water canals. And this is a shared investment. We will invest in the charging stations, and the private will need to make the shift from fossil engines to electrical ones, up until the end of 2023. We believe that only with this transition, we will be able to reduce 400 tons of CO2 emissions. The fourth and last axis of intervention is about challenges. We are launching different challenges for different audiences. Just recently, under the participatory budget that we have launched, we started the voting period of 11 projects that were presented by our citizens. The most voted ones will be implemented until April of 2021. We have simple ideas as promoting fitness activities in our local park, or more complex ones as developing and implementing a renewable energy community. What is innovative in this participatory budget is that citizens not only have to come up with the ideas, but they also need to be involved in direct contact with the city officials in the implementation of the project. They also have to be on board implementing the project. But let me now talk to you about the 5G challenge. If we have this Aveiro Tech City Living Lab in the city, we need also to implement activities that will attract and secure businesses and talent in Aveiro. Within this competition, we received over 30 applications. We selected 10 finalists, and they will be now showcasing the results of the projects that they have developed over the last 6 months. So this October, during the Aveiro Tech Week, we'll be able to showcase at City Center drones delivering blood samples to a local medical lab. They will be using this infrastructure, which is a station for drones. This is a project from the UK. We will be having robots making last mile deliveries at local restaurants. And we will be having, for instance, athletes using t-shirts that provide real-time information on their performance. These innovative solutions and projects are developed by startups, as I mentioned, from different countries like Portugal, Mexico, Italy, the UK, or Spain. By doing so, we also expect to demonstrate the importance of the Living Lab that, again, I will say this again, will be available for free for startups, researchers, and ICT companies that want to test their innovative products. So within the Aveiro Tech City initiative, and to conclude, we believe that we will be contributing to prepare our young generations to succeed in this new digital era. We will be able to empower our human resources to compete in the future job market. And also we'll be able to attract entrepreneurs, ICT companies, and R&D centers to the Aveiro Tech City Living Lab. And we want to do this while also involving our citizens in the process and mainly providing them better services and quality of living. We have started this project around 18 months ago. There is still, of course, a lot to be done. There's still a lot to learn, but we are confident about the steps that we have made so far. I'd like to leave you now with a small video about the first 18 months of the project. Thank you.
Demos os primeiros passos para a transformação digital da cidade, com base numa estratégia pioneira suportada por uma sólida rede de parceiros. Definimos e operacionalizamos um conjunto de atividades para construir uma cidade e uma economia baseadas no conhecimento. Desafiamos o talento para a implementação de soluções disruptivas e, em resposta a desafios 5G ou desafios urbanos, estamos a implementar projetos piloto nas áreas da mobilidade, ambiente e energia. Identificamos as necessidades do mercado para requalificar os recursos humanos da economia local e estamos a oferecer programas de formação e qualificação. procuramos prezar várias áreas do saber para estimular a criatividade. Promovemos competências STEAM em todos os níveis de ensino com ações concretas a diferentes níveis. Inauguramos os Tech Labs nas escolas, capacitamos os docentes enquanto agentes de mudança, esquematizamos e prototipamos a plataforma urbana de dados. Para onde seguimos? Quais são os próximos passos? Mantenha-se atento. Este projeto é para si.
Well, thank you very much. I will now be available for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, André. And if, like me, you're looking jealously at how beautiful Aveiro looks in that film, thanks for giving us an insight into, I guess, the old and new in your cities, and old and new is a theme running through all four of these conversations. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, André, so we don't have a huge amount of time, but I've got a couple of quick questions for you, if you could just answer them briefly. The first one is about the readiness of schools. So the infrastructure, the teachers, how easy has that been? Is that kind of equipment in all of your schools? Was it already there? Just what's the state of play in relation to the work with the education sector?
Well, yes, we started a dialogue with the directors from the schools already 2.5 years ago, and also based on the work that we're doing on promoting entrepreneurship in local schools. So they already knew our team, they already knew who was going to implement these activities, but we started this dialogue about STEAM competences and about code literacy and other ideas that we would like to implement within this integrated educational strategy on STEAM. And it was very important to have them on board since the very beginning, because, as I said before, the change agents for the implementation of this project are the teachers. Either we have them on board with us, either they are available to participate in the training activities and get the necessary competencies, because let me say that this is extracurriculum activities that they are doing. This is not within the educational curriculum. What we told from the very beginning is that the content that we will be producing would be adapted to the educational curriculums in schools, so that they will be able to teach maths, nature, history, what they need to teach these students, but also being able to develop the other STEAM competences that are for us important in the future job market. So having them on board from the very beginning and co-designing with them this project was, I think, crucial, because when we launched, already the directors, were positive about it, and they already knew what would be, I would say, the first teachers that would get involved in these activities. And after the first teachers get involved and they see the positive outcomes of it, they also start inviting other colleagues to join. So again, implementing such an activity, you really need to start a dialogue way before the time when you will start its implementation. I remember that we even bought some service providers presenting, what would be some of the activities. We brought in also the researchers from the university talking about the different projects and activities that they were implementing. So there was a long dialogue, and fortunately they embraced the project, and we were able to start it this last October. And yes, we are covering all schools at all different levels. Secondary schools are 4, primary schools 31, and in this next educational year, we will also go to the 7 schools of the second and third cycle of education. Okay, thanks, André. And although we don't have time to answer it, I'm going to put this question out there because it might be useful to follow up later. Because I know that Maria Rauch, who you may know, who also works in northern Portugal, asked a question about lower skilled older workers. And I know that in Rotterdam, HENDRIK, these, the work learning agreements, and a lot of focus on young people, which is correct, but also if you look at Europe's demographics, we have lots of older people who will struggle maybe to make that transition into the new jobs we're talking about. And sadly, we can't really go there just now, but I put it out there, and maybe we can follow up with that later on when we send out some of the material after this event. So I'm keeping an eye on time. We've got about 10 minutes left. What I'd like to do is bring everyone back in. This is one of these, I think we probably all know that working digitally, you're having to constantly rethink what you're doing. And plan A
was we would have a 30-minute conversation now about the principles of the Leipzig Agreement and how they fitted with the work we're doing. So Plan A disappeared about 20 minutes ago. Plan B is I guess a more kind of conversation focused on the here and now. We've already talked about in terms of the principles. You've already mentioned our 4 speakers: participation and co-creation. We've talked about the integrated approach. We've talked about the place-based approach. Multi-level governance has run through these conversations. So I think, you know, all of those principles, we've touched upon those. So I'm comfortable that we've kind of covered the bases. But I guess the €1 million question is, how does life look beyond this? Because in a sense, some of these conversations have been looking at what we've done prior to February, March 2020. COVID and its aftermath has been a game changer in many respects. I'd just like to ask each of you, just very briefly, just to share a couple of thoughts on how transformative this is going to be for the work that you're doing. So is it business as usual? Is it something which is a temporary blip? Or is it something which fundamentally alters the way you're approaching the work you've shared with us this morning? And I'll maybe start with you, Hendrik, Jan, because you got it started this morning. Just a couple of thoughts from you, please, on how big an impact this will have on the work you've been sharing with us today.
Two remarks. The city is actively reassessing our sort of pre-2020 notion of the growth sectors. We've had a lot of investments in infrastructure for conventions and trade fairs. Rotterdam was booming in its nightlife. We were attracting tourism. We're going to reorganize the Eurovision Song Festival again 2021, with or without an audience. We don't know what this means. What we do know is that the city's relations with the parts of the infrastructure which have a large public value is changing. So the theaters, the musea, the nightlife. Does this mean a shrinking city, or will we still be a growing city? We don't know that. So that is reassessing our current position. The biggest worry, I think, has to do with reschooling, but also with training and vocational training. If you talk about the digital divide, this is extremely urgent. We have missing children from school. We had school as an infrastructure of early warning for signals in the family when they were going wrong. We have vocational training students which cannot get practical experience because of all the COVID social distance measures. So we see an increase in the danger of inequalities, and this is for us. This is I think the most urgent realization at this moment. And we already had these inequalities, of course. Your sound, Eddy.
Here we are. We already talked about, you know, COVID as a catalyst and shining a light on things which are already structural challenges which are already there. So thanks for that, Hendrik, Jan. Now let's jump to Tamar. Tamar, just a couple of brief thoughts from you. And I hate to have to do this because it's such a kind of huge, complex issue, but obviously time is against us. How is this impacting on your work in Preston?
Well, initially it had quite a huge impact, really. Procurement practically stopped because businesses stopped operating. So a lot of work didn't carry on contracts, and procurement was very focused on specific things like PPE, personal protective equipment, and other things that we needed to help us get through the crisis. I think going forward, there are a number of challenges and a number of opportunities. One of the challenges is actually, again, revisiting our business base, understanding who's actually made it through the crisis, who's still there, who wants to participate in public procurement. But there's also an opportunity from the point of view of looking at social and environmental criteria and how we can use those to deliver more effective and efficient procedures. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, but clearly there are still challenges going forward.
about opportunities. So from a Mouans-Sartoux perspective, is this, you can't say this is a positive thing, but clearly there are positives. What are some of the challenges that you're facing in terms of what you're trying to do there around food policy?
Well, actually, I would say that it has reinforced our thinkings about what should be the future of food and agriculture. Actually, I wouldn't say it doesn't change much in our strategy. It just, actually proved us that we were going in the right way. I think what has really changed, as I was saying, is that more and more people, it has already started before the COVID crisis, but more and more people are aware of these issues. And as we have already been working a lot on these issues, we have more and more people coming to us asking for questions on how to work on these issues. But I would say, yeah, it's not behind us because we still have to live with it. But it was something like a boost to our good practices. And we actually really hope that it's going to keep going in the future. And that more and more cities are going to get involved in these sustainable food issues.
Thanks, Nathan. Let's jump lastly. Same question to you, André. How big a game changer is this in Aveiro and the work you've shared with us this morning?
Well, as we are saying that human resources need to adapt to this new labor market, I think also cities need to be responsive, need to be resilient, need to be ready to adapt to the challenge that confronts us. And this COVID-19 pandemic situation is definitely a big challenge, and I think we'll be facing more ahead of us. And let me share with you 2 or 3 examples of how we have adapted to this COVID-19 situation with, I would say, some positive results. In Portugal, schools closed, and there was an online program so that all the kids from would be able to attend classes online. And in Aveiro, we had a situation that, of course, some families had the computer and the internet connections needed to be on that national platform that was created to have the online classes, but other students didn't. And basically, with this STEAM education program, we needed to buy around 210 computers for the tech labs and for the code literacy platform that we were experimenting. And with those 210, another 200 computers that we bought, we landed those computers, and we created internet connections for students and for families that were in need, because of course all of them should have equal access to education. And again, we needed to be responsive. We needed to understand what was the problem, and we were able to use material equipments that we had in schools that were not going to be used, and we lended them to the families in need. This is a good example. Another good example also on the area of education, and I will just give you 2 or 3 examples on those matters, was the Code Hero program that we launched. It was already thought to be launched in April, and it's basically an online programming game for students from secondary level, and also for people that are unemployed and looking for new job opportunities, because basically you can test if you have the necessary competences to become or not a coder. This is directly linked then to the Aveiro Tech City bootcamps, because if you manage to have positive results in the around 60 exercises that you have, then that means that probably you are able to continue your journey and become a full stack developer. And this is all online. So we had around roughly 100 participants, for 40 to 50 students and other just general public. We had a small financial prize for those that would complete more fast the exercises. And this was again a way to engage them and to prepare them for this for new career opportunities. But definitely, I think we will need to rethink how is it that we, the cities, are going to promote ourselves and to prepare ourselves for this situation. We need to enter the inside of the minds of the human resources and the labor force to understand what is it that cities need to offer for them to want to live in Aveiro, in Rotterdam, in Preston, in other cities.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, André.
The challenge we have ahead, big challenge.
Absolutely. And this conversation, of course, will continue. We're going to draw our discussion this morning to a close. And as we do, I'd ask you to jump back into Slido before you leave, because we've asked you another question, which is, give us a word which connects the conversation around the productive city and the green city, because coming up later today and next up is our city is talking about the green city. Marceline Bonneau, my colleague, will be moderating that session. So if you are kind enough to have a look at Slido before you finish up, we can just share some thoughts on the connections. While we're doing that, and I think Hauke will put that on the screen shortly. While we're doing that, I'd just like to thank all of our speakers from this morning for 4 really excellent contributions. I think you've got us off to a great start in our session today, where we're going to be looking at the city dimensions of the Leipzig Charter. Thanks to all of you in the audience who have been with us. I know it's a big ask to sit and look at a screen for 2 hours. You know, again, we're all adapting and trying to find ways to rework our life balance. But I hope you've found this stimulating, interesting, and useful. We will be sharing material, of course, recording this session. We'll be following up to send you copies of the presentations. I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to answer all the questions. One about long-term political governance, the one I mentioned earlier about older workers. We might be able to follow up on those after the session today. So you have the contact details of our speakers. Okay, that's enough from me. I've talked enough this morning. Thanks again. Enjoy your lunch, everyone. Bon appetit, smakelijk, whatever you say, wherever you are. We look forward to seeing you in an hour or so's time for our conversation about the Green City. Thank you very much and see you later.